Hello and welcome to my channel. When I ask MBBS students about which is the most difficult subject for them, most of them say it's ophthalmology. Honestly speaking, if you understand the concept, ophthalmology is a cakewalk. So I'll be discussing most of the chapters and topics related to ophthalmology. Our today's lecture is a very basic one. It is the anatomy of the eyeball. I'll be briefly discussing about the anatomy of eyeball. As we go in detail with each of the chapters, I'll discuss the anatomy in detail. Okay, so let's have an overall view today. If I talk about an eyeball, I say eyeball is like a spear. Okay, but honestly speaking, eyeball, we call it as an oblate spheroid. So it is like a spear. Okay. Now, supposing this is the eyeball. Okay. So, this part. This will be the anterior part. Okay. And this is your posterior part. Right. So, there is an anterior pole and a posterior pole. Anterior part में the maximal convex part that you have will be your anterior pole. Okay. So the maximal convexities on the anterior side is your anterior pole, and the maximum convexity on your posterior side is your posterior pole. The diameter here is your anterior posterior diameter. Okay. Now you have one more diameter, that is your vertical diameter. And exactly 90 degrees to vertical diameter, you will have your horizontal diameter. Okay. Then there is the circumference of eyeball. Then the eyeball has volume and weight. Okay. So if I talk about the AP diameter, it is almost 24 millimeters. Horizontal diameter is just 23.5 mm. Vertical diameter is 23 mm. That is the reason we say it as an oblate spheroid. Okay. The total volume of each eyeball is about 6.5 ml and they weigh approximately 7 grams. Okay. Now let's start with the coats of the eyeball. Okay. As you all know from your anatomy first year, we have 3 coats. So eyeball comprises of 3 coats. The first one is the outer layer or the fibrous layer. The second one is your middle layer, otherwise called as your vascular layer. And the last one is your innermost, otherwise called as nervous layer. That is your retina, right? Okay. So if I talk about the outermost, okay, first we'll discuss about the outermost, that is your fibrous coat. This is a dense, okay, and strong wall. Why is it dense and strong? Because it has to protect all the intraocular contents, right? Now this outermost coat is divided into an anterior 1/6 and a posterior 5/6. Okay? Anterior 1/6 and posterior 5/6. Anterior 1/6 is transparent and is called cornea. Posterior 5/6 is opaque and is called sclera. Okay, so this part is your cornea. This whole part is your sclera. Now, this is the point where your cornea and sclera are meeting, right? So, this is called as corneoscleral junction. It has a specific name. What is the specific name? It is called as limbus. Okay. So this is all about your outer fibrous coat. Now the conjunctiva is attached here. I'll discuss about it later. Okay. Coming to the second, that is your middle coat. What is the middle coat? Otherwise called as vascular coat, right? And its specific name is uveal tissue. So outermost layer was your fibrous coat. What was its function? Its function was protection of the intraocular contents. Now this is the middle vascular uveal tissue. What is its function? It provides nutrition, right? It supplies nutrition to various structures of the eyeball. Now this uveal tissue consists of 3 parts. Okay. The 3 parts are your iris, your ciliary body, and the choroid. Okay. Now if I draw a diagram, supposing this is your cornea, this is the sclera, right? Now because it is vascular, I am using a red color. Okay. This part here will be the choroid. Okay. This choroid continues anteriorly and forms a ciliary body here. Okay. Ciliary body continues as iris. So this is your iris. This is the ciliary body. This is the uveal tissue. Okay. So what are the 3 parts of your second middle vascular coat? It is here the choroid. Anteriorly here you have your ciliary body. And then this is your iris. Okay. Now you have the innermost coat, that is your nervous coat. Third one is your innermost nervous coat, otherwise called as retina, right? So this is your innermost retinal layer. It continues behind as your optic nerve, right? Now retina has 2 layers. One is the muscle. Okay. Now what is the function of this innermost? What is the function of this innermost nervous coat? It is concerned with visual functions, right? So sclera was concerned with the protection, right, the outermost fibrous cord. Then the middle vascular layer was concerned with nutrition, and then the innermost nervous cord is concerned with your visual function. Now the next important topic that you should have a very clear concept about is segment and chambers of eyeball. So once this is clear, chapters like glaucoma and everything will be at your tips. That's it. Okay. Now your eyeball has two segments. Okay. One is your anterior segment and the next one is your posterior segment. Okay. The anterior segment consists of two chambers, that is your anterior chamber and the next one is your posterior chamber. Okay. So now I told you that there is ciliary body over here, right? यहाँ पे you will have lens, crystalline lens. This is also transparent. Okay. So the crystalline lens is suspended here with the help of fine ligaments, okay, which are attached to the ciliary body, suspensory ligaments, okay. Now let us come to your anterior segment first. Anterior segment, okay, this is cornea, this is your sclera, this is iris, okay, ciliary body. I'll use a separate color here so that you can understand it clearly. This is the crystalline lens. This crystalline lens is suspended from ciliary body by zonules, right? So your anterior segment will include crystalline lens and structures anterior to it. That means crystalline lens and from here to here is your anterior segment, right? All this shaded part, okay. So this will be your anterior segment. And posterior segment will include structures posterior to lens. Matlab, all this part, the shaded part here. Okay. All this will be your posterior segment. Anterior segment, if you see, is structures anterior to the crystalline lens. So what all can you see here? You can see the crystalline lens, right? Then you can see the iris. Then you can see the cornea. Then the two aqueous filled spaces. One is in front of the iris, one is behind the iris, this one. So these are your anterior chamber and posterior chamber respectively. If I have to write what anterior segment includes, it will include, first thing is crystalline lens. Crystalline lens. Then what all can you see here? Iris, right? So iris. Then what is over here? It is the cornea. Okay. So cornea. And then the two aqueous filled spaces. Two aqueous filled spaces. What is the name for these two spaces? It is the anterior chamber and posterior chamber. Okay. So coming to your anterior chamber now. Anterior. So if I have to write the boundaries, anatomy mein you always have to know the boundaries, right? So anterior chamber is bound anteriorly by cornea, I can say, right? Anteriorly by back of cornea. Then posteriorly, I can say there is iris and part of ciliary body, right? So posteriorly by iris and part of ciliary body. Okay. Then this anterior chamber from here to here, it is approximately 2.5 mm deep in center. Okay, 2.5 millimeters deep in center. And it contains about 0.25 ml of aqueous humor. Aqueous humor. Okay. Coming to your posterior chamber now. Posterior chamber. Anterior chamber. Posterior chamber. A posterior chamber is from the iris till your crystalline lens, right? So I can say that it is bounded anteriorly by posterior surface of iris. Posterior surface of iris. Then posterior surface of iris and part of ciliary body. Coming to the posterior chamber now. Okay, so it is from your eye behind the iris to in front of the crystalline lens, right? So you can see that it is a kind of, triangular space, right? Triangular space. So I can say that anteriorly it is bounded by posterior surface of iris and part of ciliary body. Whereas posteriorly it is bounded by crystalline lens and its zonules. Laterally by ciliary body, right? Okay. Then the last one is your posterior chamber. Posterior chamber हो गया, तो posterior segment है अब, right? Now the posterior segment is here, I told you, right? Behind the lens. So what do we have behind the lens? We will have vitreous humor. So what do we have behind the lens now? So what do we have behind the lens? We have vitreous humor. Okay? Vitreous humor. Then we have the retina. Then we have your choroid and the optic disc. Correct? What is vitreous humor? It is nothing but it is a gel-like material which will fill the posterior segment. Okay. Now, one important, very short answer for you all is, or you can say a viva question is, what are the appendages of the eye? Okay. appendages of the eye. So, these are your eyelids, your eyebrows, your conjunctiva, and the lacrimal apparatus. All these are your appendages of the eye. Now, see, this eyeball has to be protected by something. So, you have your eyelids here, right? These are your eyelids. Obviously, with beautiful eyelashes here. Okay. So, now, the two shutters that protect your eye anteriorly are nothing but the eyelids. Now there is a thin membrane that will line the posterior part of the eyelid and the anterior part of sclera. Okay, I'll use another color here. Matlab from here. Here. Yes, like this. Okay, from here to here. Then this eyelid also posterior part, it turns like this, and on the anterior part of the sclera. This is called as your conjunctiva. Now conjunctiva also you can just look through it. Okay. So what is palpebral conjunctiva and what is bulbar conjunctiva? That conjunctiva which is posterior to your eyelids is your palpebral conjunctiva. And that which is on the sclera, this part is your bulbar conjunctiva. We will discuss in detail when we talk about the chapter conjunctiva. Okay. I hope the basic anatomy is very clear, right? A quick revision. So the eyeball is nothing but it is an oblate sphere. The anterior most convex part is your anterior pole. The posterior maximal convexity part is your posterior pole. Anterior pole to posterior pole is your anterior posterior diameter, which is 24 mm. Then you have a vertical diameter, that is 23 mm, and 90 degrees to your vertical diameter is your horizontal diameter, which is 23.5 mm. So by this you can conclude that it is not a sphere but an oblate spheroid. The volume of each eye is 6.5 ml and the weight is 7 grams. You have three coats: outer fibrous layer, middle vascular layer, and innermost nervous layer. The outer fibrous coat is dense and strong. It is divided into an anterior 1/6 transparent cornea and posterior 5/6 opaque sclera. The junction between the cornea and sclera is your corneoscleral junction, otherwise called as your limbus. The middle vascular coat or the ovial tissue, it is basically concerned with the nutrition of the eyeball. It has three parts: the iris, the ciliary body, and the choroid, right? So the last and the innermost nervous coat is your retina. It is concerned with your visual function. If we talk about the segment and chambers of the eyeball, we have two segments and two chambers. The two segments are your anterior segment and posterior segment. Anterior segment has your anterior chamber and posterior chamber. All the structures in front of the crystalline lens are in your anterior segment, and all the structures behind your crystalline lens are your posterior segment structures. Now what are the structures anterior to crystalline lens? Those are the crystalline lens, the iris, the cornea, and the two aqueous filled spaces, which are the anterior chamber and the posterior chamber. Now what is the anterior chamber? Anterior chamber is anterior aqueous filled space, that is bounded anteriorly by the back of cornea, posteriorly by iris and part of ciliary body. It is 2.5 mm deep in the center and has 0.25 ml of aqueous humor. Your posterior chamber is bounded anteriorly by posterior surface of iris and part of ciliary body, posteriorly by the crystalline lens and its zonules, laterally by the ciliary body. Now it has how much? It has about 0.6 ml, 0.06. Okay. The posterior chamber has 0.06 ml of aqueous humor. Now the posterior segment is all those structures behind the crystalline lens. So what does it include? It includes the vitreous humor, the retina, the choroid and the optic disc. Now coming to the most important viva question, what are the appendages of the eye? So it has 4 structures, that is the eyelids, the eyebrows, the conjunctiva and the lacrimal apparatus. Conjunctiva we will deal in our next class in detail. Okay, so that's it for today. If you like the video, please like, subscribe and share with your friends so that medicine becomes easy for them. Bye bye, take care.